What's up, everybody? Welcome to Epic Battlecry. It's Friday. Everybody give a clap because it's Friday.
Yay!
End of the Fridays are great. End of the week with a W-E-E-K because it's definitely not W-E-A-K to be on EBC because we know that we bring it strong, we bring it long, all day, every day, 5 days a week on our YouTube channel and EpicBattleX.com.
What kind of show are we doing again now? Because
yeah, I thought you were going to go into like a... shit.
It's like, it's now male strippers!
Yeah! That's Brent Adams and Tony Grice. Welcome to this weekend edition, beginning of the weekend, of Epic Battlecry. Today's question, we're going to dive right in, comes from Pista Claudia Cornell. I don't know how to say this. How do you pronounce this Twitter handle?
Murdorian?
Murdorian.
Yeah, Murdor Rain.
That sounds like a really fancy...
Rain.
Murdo Rain?
I don't know.
I like Midorian better because it sounds like a really exotic sports car. Dude.
It's just that the I doesn't come before the A is the only problem with that.
Have you ever driven a Midorian? I don't know. But anyway, here's the question. It goes a little something like this. At Epic BattleX, hi guys. Why do you think big publishers care less and less about their core gamers? Example, EA with Dead Space versus Dark Souls. Does anybody know what the FR is for?
EA.
What's FR for? Fr. I don't know. But anyway. Who knows? But anyway.
I guess because it's From Software. Maybe that they were...
From Software. Yeah, potentially. Could have been capitalized. But anyway. Might
have also gotten cut off.
Potentially, because there are only 140 characters on Twitter, as we learned earlier.
Only some people are able to fit.
Only the elite are able to rise to the top and squeeze their question into 140 characters.
Squeeze a question into 140 characters. Go ahead.
So, TG and 3D, what do you think about this? Why do you think that big publishers, and do you think that they actually care less about the core audience? Like, what is the sign of caring less? I mean, he gave an example of Dead Space.
Yeah.
So what do you think about this question?
I will kind of admit to a small degree, I don't know if I fully understand where he's coming from with this question, but I think
it's like going mainstream with something that started off with a very focused identity and focused type of experience and then kind of going mainstream. I definitely feel this way about Mass Effect, which I'll get to, but tell me what you think.
Well, I think really it unfortunately just comes down to the fact that it is the publishers of big companies. I mean, there's a reason why, EA and Activision and a lot of these big publishers, not developers, but publishers get kind of so much negative press, and that's because they are looking at the bottom line.
Yeah.
When every decision they make, I hate to say it, they're in the video game business, but I could probably guarantee you that most of the people in the that are running these parts of the company are really that big of gamers. They know what numbers tell them. So they look at numbers and they say, hey, look, we're told we got a good, highly rated review on game X over here, but we only sold 250,000 copies.
Right.
But we got a crappy rating on this game over here and we sold 2 million. So I don't really care if we make games that people really think are great. I'm more concerned with games that people play. And I'll be brutally honest, I think there is, even to the gamer, some logic to that, because I think there is something to say, like, hey, look, this may be a really cool game and maybe it's very different or has some new take on it. But if people are playing these other games, there's obviously a market for it. So, I mean, there's obviously something those games are doing right as well.
Yeah.
Maybe they're derivative. Maybe they are, the same thing that you've played 15 other times. But you know what? Sometimes people like that. I mean, people will go to see a fourth fucking Transformers movie made by Michael Bay. Sometimes people have no taste, but they know what they like, and so they'll go see the same thing constantly over. So I don't even think it's necessarily the publishers just being assholes. I think, it's just being
supply and demand, right?
It's just chasing
supply and demand.
Yeah, I mean, it's just chasing money.
That's what
They're
it comes down
to. If we turn Dead Space into something more akin to a shooter, we'll sell more copies because, more people will buy that as opposed to a really hardcore survival horror experience.
Right.
And so that's the thing. I kind of feel like I think that they are, in a sense, kind of turning their back on core gamers, but I think that that's because core gamers are probably more I think they're probably a little bit more picky, I guess, than like the mainstream. You know, I think that mainstream gamers will play a game and probably get some enjoyment out of it. Kind of like Tony's saying with Transformers. Although I'm not saying this to be snide in any way. I think that there's a lot of gamers, you know, who will pick up a game and play it and say, "Oh yeah, I really enjoyed that." Whereas, you know, your quote unquote core gamers will play that and really pick it apart and be like, "Nah, this sucked. The controls were floaty and I didn't like the HUD and blah 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 blah."
They're more picky.
That's the thing. I think that they just tend to kind of be
and it's
more
difficult to make them happy, even if they set out to do those things, and then they keep getting this pushback. You know, if they're like, "Hey, we tried to make it as good as we could," and that's the thing
is that, you know, what core gamers want. It's this really interesting, you know, kind of battle between these tensions, because what core gamers, at least in my opinion, want is they want something really innovative. Right. And the simple fact of the matter is that, you know, from the game company's perspective, innovative is risky. You know, innovative is unproven. Innovative is more something expensive. We don't know. It can be, certainly.
I mean, just because, I mean, to change up the formula, you're almost always going to have to spend more resources on it.
Correct.
Yeah, in some cases, that's definitely true. But the point is that game companies look at innovation, and I think it scares them a little bit. And I think that they're like, well, let's... Like what worked 5 minutes ago? Let's do that again, you know? Yeah. Well, and so that's that mentality, I think, that leads to, you know, what we consider to be kind of watered down titles.
Well, and I don't think... I mean, the question is phrased as, why do you think big publishers care less and less about their core gamers? And that is something that we've talked about for years and years on this show, about disrespecting the core through a variety of means, whether that is through DLC, whether it's through pre-order type of stuff. I think that in general, there can be a perception that if you're an early adopter, if you're a core gamer, if you're willing to go through the hard times to get to the good stuff, that you are going to be taken advantage of in this industry, because ultimately the end goal is to make things as mass marketable and mass appeal as possible. And that is something that is a problem, but it's not a problem that's exclusive to the gaming industry, as you guys were talking about. It's about supply and demand. And I feel that in the gaming sector, you know, you kind of sign up for that when you're playing certain games. Now, there are franchises like Dark Souls and things like that that are, you know, intentionally for a core audience. They try to expand it a little bit. But when a publisher comes along like an EA or an Activision and acquires a company or signs a deal, their goal, their objective, and their sole reason for existing as a business is to, you know, provide their shareholders with the most profitability for what they're investing in. And it makes sense from a business standpoint that they would do these kind of things. Now, I personally don't always like it, because I feel that a lot of the soul of the game gets sucked out when they do that. For me, Mass Effect 3, I mean, it was the complete commercialization of what was such a beautifully crafted game. I really hated how it kind of got, you know, trying to be all things to all people, very actiony, tons of, you know, a lot more, you know, heavy metal sex type of like mainstream. I don't know. It was... No, seriously. I mean, it was the dumbing down. Okay. I mean, like, you talk about movies and stuff that kind of are dumbed down. It was the
mainstreaming of the series. I mean, they took the series and...
Yes, that's what I mean by, like, you know, if you want to increase the appeal of anything to the mainstream market, you add sex and violence. That's what you do. I mean, everybody knows that. And that's what it felt like to me with Mass Effect 3. And so, you know, I just feel like when a publisher comes along, that's their job, and maybe it opens the audiences up to different experiences, but at the same time, you kind of lose the soul of certain things. Now, that's a blanket statement that can't be applied to everything. Of course, yeah. But
can I just bring up one little point too?
No.
I think maybe a sort of a better question, at least from my perspective, is why would you really care about big publishers and what they care about? Because the great thing is, nowadays we have more options than ever in terms of who, you know, how we can get material. You know, we're at this point where it used to be that if a big publisher wasn't putting the game out, it didn't get put out.
There wasn't a game. Yeah.
There wasn't a game.
There was no game for the people that wanted that experience.
Exactly. Now we have an opportunity where, admittedly, you do love it when a game that you really love comes together just the way you want, and it's backed by this company that can put out, that can maybe put more money into the voice talent, more money into the production values.
But if they're putting it into a way that is going to enhance the original vision, not
that's
mainstream.
my whole point. That's my whole point, though. That's what I'm saying. When that happens, that's great. But I mean, the whole point is that doesn't always happen. So why not go to the companies like From Software, who's making Dark Souls, who made a very kind of a narrow window for a series, but it's got its huge fans. I mean, now it has not sold the amount of copies as a fucking Call of Duty or Battlefield or something like that. So are we going to see those kind of games coming out from an EA or from an Activision? Maybe not. But in a way, why worry about it when you can just as easily support these other companies that are doing it? And the more you support them, the bigger they become to the point that they can do more of these games and hopefully don't change over to EA.
I see what you're saying, but at the same time, the reason why you do care is because you care about what was there first before it transformed. So. I mean, I used to be in a band, indie band. We never really, we flirted with success in terms of we had a New York-based manager who got us lots of great gigs. We did showcases for lots of great labels. They wanted to change our music. I mean, they literally wanted to change our music, and that's one of the reasons I love Rush, not for anything, but they were, very sold that
they didn't care about not being popular. they were content just making the music.
Go ahead and name me a couple of bands that have been around for 30 years that are still playing.
Hey, just because they've had to work for 30 years to make it worth it to them this is not a good example.
But seriously, that's one of the reasons I love them is because they stuck to their guns. They decided that their creativity, their expression, their ability to use music as their outlet and whatever they wanted to do was more valuable to them than selling out and becoming more mainstream. And they did that.
But there's probably thousands of groups out there that would love to have had their music heard at all and maybe made a few choices. I'm not saying everybody does. Some people it is all about the ethic. They will stick to their guns no matter what. But then in some cases that means that their music never gets heard by by people out there.
True.
Whereas if they do choose to make some concessions, maybe that gets it out there, and then they do get the chance to write those songs that they do want to write, down the road. So it's hard to say that one choice is just right or wrong.
No, it's not
sometimes
right or
I think
wrong,
making a concession or making something that changes your opinion of something isn't necessarily always you just saying, fuck it, I'm all about the money. Sometimes it's about, look, I want the opportunity to do what I want to do, and so sometimes I have to make concessions.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I generally get the sense that there's kind of this sweet spot within the creative realm, whatever it is you're creating, whether it's a film or music or a video game, there's kind of this, like, we've got an idea, we're going to make it work, we're on to something. And then it gets to this level of like realization of what that initial idea was. And then either it gets bought out to be commercialized or whatever. So it's usually always...
Or it doesn't make it, or it goes one or the other.
I would be very interested to go back through the series of like franchises, whether it's Indiana Jones and Star Wars or gaming franchises like God of War. Most of the time when you look at those things, like Brent, I know you love God of War 2, Mass Effect 2, the best one for me. Like when you look at,
I like the first one more.
Mass Effect, you like the first Mass Effect one?
Yeah, I like the first Mass Effect more.
Well, I mean, for me though, like I would actually, that'd be a really interesting study to like look at the sweet spot of creativity for all these types of franchises, because ultimately you get to a point of popularity where you have the ability to kind of cash in on what it is that you've created, but at the same time your creativity in its second iteration is usually at its peak. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know.
Well, but how many people though still say that the first one is better? Like, they totally screwed. I mean, it's different for everybody.
Yeah, it is, but there's an interesting phenomenon with games. and the iterative process where, you know, we expect games to get better as they go along, you know.
Yeah.
But the truth of the matter is,
I think it's got an unrealistic expectation too, honestly. Like, I mean, if you're really, that's a little fair to always expect it to get better. I mean, sometimes
it depends,
sometimes you have the Dark Knight.
It depends on
how you're measuring. It depends on how you're measuring. You know, like in terms of graphics, you know, they are probably always going to get better. You know, in terms of the design elements and things like that, you know, that usually, because those things, you know, get better.
Did you finish Mass Effect 2, by the way?
Yeah, I did.
Oh, and you thought the first one was better?
I like the tone of the first one. The first one being more about exploration and kind of, you know, putting you into that world and just sort of setting you loose on it, as opposed to the second one where there was because of the narrative, there was that focus like oh, there's like a time crunch, like we got to do this,
but there was so much exploration.
Wasn't it a little more action based in the second one?
It was a little more action based.
I remember you guys talking about that when the second one came out.
It was the perfect mix.
I get like why the second one's cool, and there are definitely great characters in it and everything, but I just like the way the first game made me feel more. Anyway,
I like the third one best because it essentially killed the series off for all time.
It basically did. But to get back to the point, depending on you know, just the metric that you use, you know, people have this expectation that games will get better. But the point is that, you know, whoever's working on it, whatever they're doing, you do peak creatively at some point. You know, at some point you kind of get the exact version of the idea that you're going for. You get kind of the perfect execution, and definitely the second game in the series sometimes kind of gets it. Like sometimes you get the first game, like, all right, you get it out on the table, you figure out what you want to do, and you're like, oh, but you know, we could do this, oh, save it for a sequel, you know, or the technology needs to evolve a little bit so that it can come along. And definitely in the case of something like God of War 2 or, you know, Uncharted 2 is a good example. Mass Effect 2, you know, is a debatable point. I know that I'm probably in the minority on that, but anyway, it does seem like the second outings of video games are very often the kind of peak of that realization of whatever the execution and idea working together were.
Well, and the thing is, like you said, I said is, and I think it's totally subjective. I think because I mean, realistically, you look at every series across all of time, people are going to be all over the map. You know, I mean, there's going to be some definitive peaks where, you know, people are like, well, most people consider this one better. But like, I'll tell you, just an older game to think about is something like Resident Evil. Resident Evil took a major change in the second game. Now, a lot of people consider the second game one of its best, and I didn't like the action level at all, like to the point where I didn't care for the game. I loved the first one, and then, like, you know, some of the remakes and 4 and some of the more recent versions of the game. But it's like everybody takes something different from every game they play. The problem is I think when you talk about like going, like we're talking about the story, kind of going sort of mainstream with these games, is that you are going to bring in a bigger audience, you know. So I mean, in most cases, so who, you know, it kind of goes back that, you know, is it right or wrong? I mean, yeah, maybe unfortunately we lost you along the way, but we gained 10 new people.
Exactly.
So who is right in that situation? Well, nobody's
like
right,
podcast.
But unfortunately this is the way we're going to go.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
What's that?
It's like our podcast.
It's exactly like our podcast.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's the thing, you know. Better is not, maybe not necessarily the word, but different. And I guess I do feel. I mean, I've certainly have felt that burn. I mean, you know, Dead Space is probably the series that I point to most often because it's the one that, you know, I just hit home for me because I was such a huge fan of the first game, and I love the mythos of that series and everything about it. And I just, you know, kind of got more and more disappointed with it as time went on, even though they sold more and more copies as time went on. And I guess that the solace that I take, you know, similar to what Tony is saying, is that if somebody does something that is really good, if somebody has a good idea, and then they move away from it because they kind of drop it and like, oh, well, I mean, this is a good idea and all, but there's more money over there, and they kind of toss it on the ground and then head for the big pile of money. Somebody comes along and picks it up, you know. And in the case of like Dead Space, I'm really sad that, you know, that Dead Space isn't quite what it used to be, but now I've got Alien Isolation, you know. And so those kinds of things. I do kind of feel like there's it's so easy to get games out into the world now. It's not necessarily easy to make games. That's still difficult. But in terms of the avenues of a creative person with a game reaching their audience, never been easier. Never been easier. And so that does really mitigate it for me. That gives me hope, and it does soften the blow knowing that that somebody's going to come along to capitalize on that good idea, not in the sense of capitalization, but somebody's going to make that idea. Somebody's going to make that game, take advantage of that idea.
Right. Well, very good. Well, Pista, we hope that answers your question, and we hope that you remember to keep gas and the oil change
anyway.
In the keep the oil change in the old Madorian, whatever the hell.
He literally stopped listening 20 minutes ago.
Midorian does sound, like it sounds like the name of like a Lamborghini or something, doesn't it? The Lamborghini Midorian.
Man, one of these days I'm going to spring for a Midorian. Anyway, thanks for joining us this week on Epic Battle Cry. That's going to do it for today. You can download an audio version of the full week of podcasts. Of course, Brent, that's available pretty much everywhere where our old audio version was available, correct?
It's on iTunes. It's on EpicBattleX.com. All the RSS feeds that you used to use are still valid. So if you were subscribed to the show, listening to the show before, you should be now as well.
Excellent. Thanks so much for joining us. We hope you have a fantastic weekend. That's going to do it for this edition of Epic Battle Cry. You can always tweet us your questions at EpicBattleAxe.com. Be sure to follow us on YouTube at YouTube.com/EpicBattleAxe. And we'll see you again next week for a full roster of your questions. If you have questions pertaining to news, whatever the hell it is, just send them our way via Twitter at EpicBattleAxe, like we said, and we'll look forward to answering them then. Until Monday, we'll see you next week. Cry havoc. Let your voice be heard. Take it easy.
Peace. Happy weekend.
Happy weekend. You guys got weekend plans? What are you doing?
I am. We're gonna check out a movie. We're gonna rent something and watch it on Saturday, and then Sunday we're going to see that Monty Python live event at the theater.
Nice. Nice. I might go up to a cabin.
Enjoy yourself.
Yeah.
Just go up to it.
Just stand.
Just walk up to it. Just stand there.
Are you going to use the bathroom on it? I mean, are you gonna
cabin?
No.
Wait.
Is that a little wood I see there?
You're not the only one with a wood.